The King's Avatar, Chapter 1419 Every Means Possible. Audio source, wusharworldaudiobook.com. Chapter 1419, Every Means Possible. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Yu Wenzu's hands weren't fast, but his mind was extremely so. In an instant, he analyzed many situations with great clarity. Like Wei Chen, he couldn't be more familiar with the Warlock class. There wasn't much match data on Windward formation, so reports on this character weren't incredibly comprehensive, but things like cast speed and cast range could be judged just from a single match. After that, even if the character improved, these stats would only increase, not decrease. According to all these known reports, Yu Wenzu now made an instantaneous judgment. He was too late. He even went a step further and recognized that this was a playstyle specifically meant to counter himself and Swaxar. If another Warlock player had been standing here, Wei Chen might not have succeeded this time. But it was him, and it was Swaxar. The player's traits, the character's stats, they had all been thoroughly studied. These few moments had been tailored to deal with Yu Wenzu and Swaxar. Nothing had been wasted, and just like this, the powerful attack Death's Door was cast. How would the situation change after 9 seconds? Yu Wenzu had wondered this question earlier. Now he knew, they didn't need to wait 9 seconds. Right now, with this Death's Door, he was about to fall into a fairly disastrous position. Far away, Windward formation now finished casting, and curse energy gathered around his Death's Hand. Behind the flashing light, Yu Wenzu could see Windward formation's face. This was exactly the face in his memories, still young, their first captain, Wei Chen. The Wei Chen of today, already over 30 years old, now had more than a few lines on his face from the passing years. Yu Wenzu watched silently, unmoving, looking as though he had given up. Wei Chen jolted, but he had already finished summoning Death's Door. Tendrils of darkness shot out from within the door, immediately wrapping around Swaxar, but even now, Yu Wenzu didn't make any movements. Correct. None at all. The darkness caught Swaxar, dragging him inside the Death's Door, but Swaxar didn't resist this process at all. And after that, the attack of Death's Door on Swaxar ended. Fuck. Wei Chen couldn't help but curse. This was Yu Wenzu's calm, his ability to clearly anticipate all that would happen. He understood that his own hand speed wasn't enough to deal with the Death's Door and Wei Chen standing intently next to it. So, he didn't try to circle around, simply allowing this powerful attack to land. He traded 15% of his health to end Wei Chen's offensive. Yes, it ended. Wei Chen boasted of how well he understood Yu Wenzu's style, but he didn't anticipate that this steady player would actually use this kind of sacrificial strategy. None of the follow-up attacks that he'd prepared were fit to deal with this kind of situation. Death's Door was successfully cast, but it ended too quickly, leaving Wei Chen grasping for a next move. Soul Slice. Wei Chen could only use an instant cast skill on instinct to try and continue his offensive. But the fact that Death's Door vanished so quickly made his heart feel empty. Soul Slice, was it? Yu Wenzu was watching Windward formation's movement, and he easily dodged this attack. He knew that Wei Chen was surprised at this moment, because he had purposely created this surprise. He saw how well Wei Chen understood himself and Swaxar, so in this kind of situation, any judgment and decision based on his style would definitely be within the opponent's calculations. At a time like this, he had to take a path that he normally wouldn't. And so, Yu Wenzu did this. He took an unusual action to instantly break the judgments that Wei Chen had made based on his deep understanding. Even the highest level experts might not have been able to notice this battle of wits. Only Yuan Zhu himself could deeply feel the familiarity that Wei Chen had toward himself and Swaxar. That death's door just now had truly forced him into a position where he had no other option. But even though he managed to do something outside of Wei Chen's predictions, he had still ultimately been unable to escape from this death's door, and Swaxar did take 15% in damage. This death's door had pushed him to desperation, even if he'd used a surprising move to swiftly climb out of this desperation. He'd disrupted Wei Chen's rhythm. But what next? Looking at this opponent that completely understood him, Yuan Zhu felt a great pressure upon him. Flaming Arrow. Yuan Zhu saw Windward Formation begin to use this skill. This was another low-level warlock skill. Even though it required a cast for these high-end professional characters, the cast time was practically instantaneous. Windward Formation's staff gave a slight wave, and this flaming arrow already formed. Black smoke burned into the shape of an arrow, and with a shake of Windward Formation's staff, the arrow flew forward. But, wasn't this distance still a bit too far? It wasn't difficult for Yuan Zhu to dodge. The range of the magic attacks from elementalists or warlocks was always be inferior to the range of a bullet. Magic attacks with only this much range weren't suppressive enough at the pro level. But after waving out this skill, Wei Chen didn't pay any more attention to Yuan Zhu and Swaxar. Windward Formation suddenly turned, and Death's hand pointed toward Flowing Cloud. Lu Hanwen's Flowing Cloud had already escaped from the hexagram prison, and he immediately came charging toward Windward Formation. He didn't expect that Windward Formation would suddenly turn to face him. Death's hand swirled with the light of a curse. Lu Hanwen frantically controlled his Flowing Cloud to dodge to the side, but that black light flew right toward the direction toward which he had tried to dodge. But Lu Hanwen was good. Even though he was walking straight into the attack, his reaction speed and control were top tier. Flowing Cloud ducked to the side once again, and that mass of black light hit only air. Wei Chen was helpless. Dealing with this youngster was entirely different from dealing with Yuan Zhu. Right now, he regretted that Death's Door had already ended, because if Yuan Zhu had prolonged its duration, then it would have served as a threat toward Lu Hanwen's Flowing Cloud as well. Yuan Zhu's bold choice had completely disrupted Wei Chen's original plan. 1v2, control Lu Hanwen for 9 seconds, and then force Yuan Zhu to suffer a powerful attack. To be honest, this was already an impressive performance. Most other players, if put in this position, probably would not have been able to play a more beautiful 9 seconds. But he wasn't satisfied. His original plan wasn't just 9 seconds. Hanwen, go over there. Seeing that Lu Hanwen had escaped, he immediately sent this message in the chat. The showdown between the old and new generation of warlocks. This was a topic that the audience greatly enjoyed seeing, but the players weren't obliged to cooperate. They were playing a match, not putting on a show. Yuan Zhu directly sending Lu Hanwen away right now certainly wasn't to cooperate with the hot topic. He simply did this because it seemed that Wei Chen's plan had been to stall both of them by himself. Even though Yuan Zhu still didn't know what his end goal was, but preventing this from happening would at least hinder Happy's plans. Huang Shaoshan's side was relying on their healer to put pressure on Happy, and they need a powerful attacker. Lu Hanwen fit this responsibility better than Yuan Zhu. So, he had Lu Hanwen go and help them. His face-off with Wei Chen was therefore only a typical, logical, strategic decision. Wei Chen, of course, couldn't accept this. Little brat, where are you running? Seeing that Flowing Cloud wanted to escape, Wei Chen refused to give up. But he could only yell. Yuan Zhu, of course, was covering Lu Hanwen's retreat. Yu Wenzu used a flaming arrow, returning the skill that Wei Chen had just tried to use against him. Wei Chen wanted to stop Flowing Cloud from leaving, but he wasn't going to have Windward Formation go and brawl it out. Of course, he would be relying on casting spells. But Swaksar's flaming arrow flew over, preventing Windward Formation from casting. But Windward Formation actually began to rush forward, and as he dodged this flaming arrow, he swung his hand and tossed out an object. Puff! Purple smoke filled the air. After the shadow clone technique, Windward Formation demonstrated yet another low-level ninja skill, Ninja Tool, Smoke Bomb. The silhouettes of Windward Formation and Flowing Cloud were swiftly swallowed by the smoke. Lu Hanwen's reaction was intelligent, with sword light illuminating the smoke. Even as he protected himself, it allowed Flowing Cloud to continue to advance. Chaotic Rain. Yu Wenzu also controlled Swaksar to begin a high-level cast. He couldn't lock onto Windward Formation's position right now. But if Windward Formation didn't come to stop him and insisted on casting a curse on Flowing Cloud, then he wouldn't have time to jump out of range of a Chaotic Rain. In the smoke, Flowing Cloud's greatsword swung every which way, seeming invincible. Puff! Amidst the fog, drops of blood scattered. Finally, it seemed that Windward Formation was hit. But quickly after, with the "pa" sound, the sword light stilled. WuxaWorldAudio.com. It was still present, but it was no longer moving forward. This was Spike Trap. Even though Yu Wenzu hadn't seen it, he could make a good guess. Wei Chen had suffered a slash, but he managed to have Windward Formation use the thief skill Spike Trap and halt Flowing Cloud's offense. But by this time, the Chaotic Rain was already pattering down. It didn't look like Windward Formation, who had just suffered a slashing attack, had time to escape from the smoke. Wei Chen is really working hard. Pan Lin exclaimed, feeling moved and saddened. Wei Chen wasn't playing a pretty match. He seemed desperate as he did everything possible to contain Flowing Cloud. Running circles around the boulder. Sent rolling to the side with a slash. And now he barely stole the chance to place this spike trap, under the cover of a smoke bomb, still hurting from a sword injury. Wei Chen wasn't fighting an easy battle. Everyone could see how he was struggling to maintain the situation. In a direct battle against Lu Hanwen, he would almost certainly lose, but by using these endless little tricks, he worked hard to try and stall both Lu Hanwen and Yu Wenzu here. But his hard work would come to an end with the fall of this Chaotic Rain. Flowing Cloud was still stuck, but Yu Wenzu was already prepared to have Swaksar come over to maintain control of Windward Formation. He had Swaksar to move forward. But then, Swaksar rolled to the left. What is Yu Wenzu doing? Everyone was stunned. This roll seemed to be completely pointless. Had he noticed some unrecognized danger? Even the audience, with their omniscient view, hadn't seen anything. But Yu Wenzu's reaction was faster and more accurate than the audience members with omniscient view. Confused, Yu Wenzu looked at Swaksar's status in shock. A moment later, he already realized what had happened. Magic Mirror. It was Magic Mirror. The Warlock skill Magic Mirror reflected all side effects of a magic attack. Amidst the smoke, not only had Windward Formation laid down a spike trap for Flowing Cloud, he had also hidden a magic mirror, waiting for Swaksar's Chaotic Rain to fall upon it. End chapter. The King's Avatar. Chapter 1420. The Value of Desperation. Audio source, WuxaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1420. The Value of Desperation. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Swaksar was confused. It had already happened, yet not a single person had noticed. Even though the audience had their omniscient view, when zoomed out, it couldn't clearly show every single detail. Everyone basically understood the overall rhythm of Wei Chen's actions, but no one had detected that Windward Formation's dirty trick just now was to hide his cast of magic mirror. The magic mirror was controlled by the caster, and could be suspended in the air. For a few single-target skills, if the magic mirror was precisely positioned, then when reflecting the skill, it could also protect the caster from taking damage. For a wide-range attack like Chaotic Rain, the magic mirror couldn't completely protect the caster, but it would still serve the purpose of reflecting the skill's side effects. So, in the end, both Swaksar and Windward Formation entered the confused state together. The careful Yu Wenzu had actually fallen into another one of Wei Chen's tricks. Everyone was shocked, but they were still wondering about the value of this plot having succeeded. Under the Chaotic Rain, both Windward Formation and Swaksar became useless. But what about Lu Hanwen's Flowing Cloud? He wouldn't be affected by a teammate's attack, and the thing that was currently preventing him from moving, the spike trap, was a mere low-level thief skill. He would definitely be the first person to escape from the control of a skill. But after that, Windward Formation would still be confused. Wasn't that just asking for a beating? At a time like this, Lu Hanwen would probably hold off on going over to help Huang Shaoshan, and instead take advantage of this opportunity to furiously attack Windward Formation. Wei Chen's response had been outside of everyone's expectations, but that didn't necessarily mean it was a perfect solution. He doesn't have any better choice. Li Yibo sighed. He can only do his best and use whatever ideas he has to tie up Blue Rain's two players. Pan Lin was silent. This old general was working so hard. Who would be heartless enough to criticize his judgment for being this or that? If he had faster reactions or faster hand speed, perhaps there would be other, better options. Both Pan Lin and Li Yibo understood this clearly, but the two of them reached an unspoken agreement not to discuss this. This hypothetical was simply too cruel, especially for an old general. He'd once had these things, only to gradually lose them. The tragedy was that he would never be able to recover them again. These scars left by the passage of time shouldn't be considered a form of failure. Wei Chen was already doing the absolute best he could with what he had. As a warlock specialist just like Yu Wenzu, he'd managed to ensnare Yu Wenzu twice. This was something that no warlock player had ever accomplished before. Not once since Yu Wenzu's debut. And now, this old general past his prime had actually managed to do it. Just based on this, he had the right to stand on this stage. Just based on this, everyone should understand why Happy sent him on stage. The smoke quickly dissipated. Flowing Cloud was still stuck in the trap. Windward Formation and Swaksar were unable to control their characters properly in the confusion. The three characters still displayed the symptoms of their statuses, as though they were performing a play. But this play would eventually reach its curtain call. Just like everyone expected, Lu Hanwen's Flowing Cloud was the first to escape from his status condition, and he immediately charged toward Windward Formation. The great sword flame shadow lifted up and then plummeted, tracing a burning scar in the air. Windward Formation was still moving around chaotically. Compared to Swaksar, who had just been standing quietly after discovering he was confused, Windward Formation seemed as laughable as a monkey. But no one could laugh. Even in this condition, was he still trying to pull something off? Seeing this, many audience members felt choked up. They knew that Wei Chen couldn't do anything, that Windward Formation would be slashed by Flowing Cloud's great sword. After that, with Yu Wenzu coming into the picture, if Wei Chen didn't receive any help, then he might meet his end right here. The old general had only returned to this stage with much difficulty. Was he about to complete his curtain call just like this? As the great sword flame shadow descended, quite a few people couldn't bear to watch. But at this moment, a pocket suddenly split open in the air, and from the shifting void, a black claw shot outward. Just this one extended claw snagged Flowing Cloud, who was using Collapsing Mountain, in mid-air. This was Warlock's skill, Claw of Darkness. Everyone was stunned. Even under confusion, he was still able to use a skill. And the first one to react was once again Yuanzu. He suddenly understood why Windward Formation, after suffering the chaotic rain, had continued to move around randomly. Because Wei Chen had been constantly trying a set series of inputs, hoping he could activate this skill through sheer luck. Claw of Darkness. Yu Wenzu thought about the inputs necessary for this skill. Indeed, when confused, this skill had a higher probability than others of being successfully used. But higher was only relative. Yu Wenzu couldn't do the calculations immediately, but he knew that it was still a very low probability. Yet even so, Wei Chen hadn't given up. As soon as he was hit by the status, he began tapping out the inputs. If the confusion disrupted his movements, then he would just start over again. In this short amount of time, no one knew just how many times he had repeated these inputs. Everyone only knew that, in the end, he had succeeded. In this crucial moment, Windward Formation's cast was successful, and he summoned forth the Claw of Darkness. Claw of Darkness was a powerful grab skill. Even Collapsing Mountain did not out-prioritize it. Just like that, Flowing Cloud was snatched in the air by the Claw of Darkness. When viewers realized that Wei Chen had this kind of determination to stubbornly pull off this skill even when confused, they felt tears gathering in their eyes. Happy's fans all knew Wei Chen's past. But to be honest, no one felt that this guy had the air of a powerhouse team's captain. In their eyes, this guy was more like a boss of a casual little group in-game. The 2 years that Wei Chen had spent in the Alliance were its grassroots days. After that, he'd never let go of the game. To be honest, Wei Chen didn't have much of the air that was associated with any present-day pro player, let alone the sort of distant, lofty air shared by the powerhouse players. Even though he was an old player that hadn't appeared very often, Happy's fans still loved him very much, exactly because he was so down to earth. It was like he had popped up in the game, casually taken down some dungeon, grabbed some equipment, and then cheerfully ran back to the professional scene to cause some chaos. And everyone felt that Happy had invited Wei Chen because they wanted someone old in their ranks to help pass on experience and knowledge to the younger members. No one thought that he would make any significant contributions in matches. They felt that his few appearances were Happy's way of paying respect to him. He would play around a bit, and everyone would watch and laugh, and that would be it. But now, everyone understood. No matter how old Wei Chen was, no matter how he lacked the air of a pro player, he still had a pro player's heart. A heart striving for victory. A heart of a champion. Using his own methods, he proved this point to everyone. Yu Wenzu, Lu Hanwen. Did they really think that 2 all-star players could stomp him down so easily? No. Up to this point, Windward Formation indeed seemed very pathetic, and he had lost more health than his opponents. Every new moment made people feel that this was it, that he was done for. But again and again, he stabilized the situation, he remained on the battlefield. This old guy, how long would it take until he gave in? Even Blue Rain's players, Blue Rain's fans, couldn't help but feel moved. So this was their old captain. So this was the senior they told stories about, their extremely dirty, extremely shameless senior. Even though he was their opponent now, in the hearts of the Blue Rain players and fans, they quietly felt a burst of pride. Yes, Wei Chen now represented Happy. But the deepest markings on his skin were those from his time as Blue Rain's first captain, the person who had laid down the foundation for Blue Rain. Applause. The entire stadium burst into applause. WushOurWorldAudio.com. From every corner of the stadium, from every corner of everyone's hearts, came forth applause. Flowing cloud fell to the side as a result of the claw of darkness, and the confusion on Windward Formation and Swaksar ended at the same time. And Wei Chen continued his tenacious struggle. Not good. Something was wrong. Yu Wenzhou wasn't someone who relied on his intuition. He made all of his judgments based on the opponent's movements and behavior. Wei Chen was desperately keeping the two of them tied down here, but there was no way that victory would be decided here. What would determine the final victory would still be that 3v3 battle. 3v3. Blue Rain had made such a confident assault, and their confidence had stemmed from the fact that Happy didn't have their healer. They could attack unrestrained, trading blood for blood, until they defeated the opponent with the greatest speed possible. But because he and Lu Hanwen had been delayed all this time, the two of them hadn't been able to enter the battle over there. So, this offensive of theirs became somewhat inefficient. And over there, Happy had 3 attackers. In terms of damage output, they had the advantage over Blue Rain. 3v2, blood for blood, Blue Rain was bound to take more damage. Even if they had a healer to support them, because there were only 2 attackers, the explosiveness of their attacks was underwhelming, which would only drag on the battle longer. The longer this dragged on, the more health they would lose and need the healer to restore. Then, that turned this into a trade of health for mana, the healer's mana. If Happy's healer successfully joined the battle at this time, and the two sides entered a prolonged conflict. Not good. It would be extremely unfavorable toward Blue Rain. The healer didn't have enough mana, so they need to fight and end this battle quickly. But Blue Rain wasn't a team that was good at a speedy attack. They were good at defensive counterattacks, waiting for the opponent to move first before striking. For this, the importance of defending the healer was obvious. Happy's goal truly was to target Blue Rain's healer, trade their own health for the healer's mana, wear down Blue Rain's healer until he was useless, so that Blue Rain had no way of fighting at their usual rhythm. Target the healer. From the professional circle to the in-game arena, the most common strategy in team battles. It was no surprise at all. And yet, it was always effective. End chapter. The King's Avatar. Chapter 1421. Understood by everyone. Audio source. WushOurWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1421. Understood by everyone. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. We can't keep it up. Right when Yu Wenzhou realized what Happy's true strategy was, Huang Shaoshan also started to feel pressured. 3v3. Team Blue Rain side had a healer. If it was a direct confrontation, their side should have the advantage. The problem was that this 3v3 wasn't the only fight taking place. From an overall perspective, their slight advantage was not nearly enough. They need speed, explosiveness, DPS, and time to eliminate their opponents. Happy's 5th player still hadn't appeared, and it wasn't just out of patience. Huang Shaoshan had deduced a certain possibility. Qiao Yifan's Phantom Demon had gone to switch with Happy's healer. Blue Rain held the advantage during this period of time. However, lowering Happy's health bars wasn't enough. They need to kill a player from Happy before their cleric arrived. Huang Shaoshan and Zheng Xuan were clearly far from achieving this goal. From time to time, the two would look towards the other battle, hoping Yu Wenzhou and Lu Hanwen would hurry and come. However, help never arrived. The two didn't try to urge their teammates to hurry up. None of them, including their healer Zhu Jingxi, typed a single word. There was no need to say anything. When Huang Shaoxun had called out to Zheng Xuan and Zhu Jingxi to counterattack, the other side should have gotten the message and made the appropriate decision. If they hadn't come yet, it could only mean that their situation didn't permit them to. Huang Shaoxun's side could not see the other battle. How could they know that their old captain Wei Chen was struggling with all his might to keep Yu Wenzhou and Lu Hanwen from leaving? As a famed opportunist, Huang Shaoxun had an excellent read of the match. Even though he didn't know the reason, without either Yu Wenzhou or Lu Hanwen, he understood that just his and Zheng Xuan's attacks weren't enough. They had dealt quite a bit of damage to Lord Grim and Boundless Sea, but they had taken even more damage. Happy's side had 3 attackers, after all. Boom boom boom. Artillery fire came from both Su Mucheng's dancing rain and Zheng Xuan's bullet rain. Ye Zhu and Fang Rui were dodging, but Huang Shaoxun and Zheng Xuan, they had their characters rush through the gunfire to attack. This was because of the difference in team compositions. Team Blue Rain had a healer, and that enabled him to be recklessly aggressive. Their health was guaranteed to be above a safe level at the cost of the mana from Zhu Jingxi's soul speaker. White light constantly flashed, protecting troubling rains and bullet rain's health. Huang Shaoxun felt that the situation wasn't good, so he constantly checked on Soul Speaker's situation. The constant flashes of white light were somewhat glaring to look at. During intense team fights, the healers would often look like this. However, it was only a 3v3, yet Soul Speaker was already this busy. It was because of their current tactics. But strangely, Happy made no attempts to stop them. How could Ye Xiu and others in Happy not understand their intentions? Of course they would, but they seemed to be fine with it. Su Mucheng's dancing rain stood farther away, so Huang Shaoxun and Zheng Xuan didn't target her. Zhu Jingxi had his soul speaker stand in a position where Su Mucheng couldn't reach him, so that his spells would not be interrupted. With him dodging around, Su Mucheng simply gave up and stopped targeting him. Happy was going along with Blue Rain's plans. They were practically setting up the conditions for Blue Rain's plans to work, as if they were luring Blue Rain to do it. Yu Wenzhou and Lu Hanwen still hadn't arrived. Was this all part of Happy's plans? Huang Shaoxun felt like something wasn't right. Troubling Rain began attacking more carefully, no longer as reliant on their healer. Zheng Xuan felt a change from Huang Shaoxun. Without asking about it, he immediately matched his bullet rain with Huang Shaoxun's rhythm. It wasn't that this guy couldn't figure out the problem, rather, he was just too lazy to think. As a result, he rarely thought deeply during a match. He always played lazily, for example, like how he was just going along with what his teammate did. Boom. Huang Shaoxun was hesitating, when he suddenly heard a muffled sound. To their side, on top of a long wall of medium height, a head suddenly poked out from a crack. The head was covered with ashen blood and in a utterly pathetic state. Who? For a moment, Huang Shaoxun wasn't sure who the character was, and had to check the name by sliding his cursor over him. Windward Formation. It was Wei Chen's Windward Formation? Has it finally been settled? Just when Huang Shaoxun thought this, that bloody head suddenly retracted. It looks like it's about over. Huang Shaoxun continued to think. If Windward Formation was eliminated, the two on that side could come over and help them. Then, they could strengthen their offense. Even if Happy's healer arrived, it would still be a 5v4. Huang Shaoxun and Zheng Xuan had already lowered Happy's health significantly, thus the match would certainly end in Blue Rain's victory. Continue to attack. Huang Shaoshan was about to shift gears back, when an order came from their captain Yu Wenzhou, slow. It was just one word. It wasn't clear who Yu Wenzhou was referring to, but Huang Shaoshan immediately slowed down. Zheng Xuan and Zhu Jingxi also saw the order, and made the same decision. Their offense suddenly slowed. Whoa, have they figured it out already? Quote, there was no way Yi Shi wouldn't notice such a change. Old Wei, you dead yet? Yi Shi said. There was no reply. Wei Chen saw it, but he could only curse inwardly. How could he have any time to chat? Keep them nervous. Yi Shu also sent out an order. His Lord Grimm and Fang Rui's Boundless Sea suddenly went aggressive. What? Huang Shaoshan and Zheng Xuan were startled. Yi Shu and Fang Rui had tried their hardest to stay on the defensive. Happy had no healer, so they need to carefully preserve their health. They could not afford to be as reckless as Huang Shaoshan and Zheng Xuan. Yi Shu's Lord Grimm had some healing capabilities, but in such an intense battle, his healing was like trying to put out a burning cart with a cup of water. Now, the two suddenly bared their fangs. That was a fierceness only troubling Rain and Bullet Rain previously had. Happy's healer has arrived. That was the first thought from Blue Rain's team members. Sure enough, and when Yi's little cold hands appeared from behind a stone pillar. His cross, holy contract, glowed with white light, a spell ready to cast. Sure. Holy light surrounded Lord Grimm. In that instant, the holy light seemed to converge and then blossom into a wave of resplendence. Critical heal. It was similar to a critical hit from an attack. A critical heal would heal 50% more, just like how a critical hit dealt 50% more damage. Lord Grimm's health instantly shot up a chunk. Little Cold Hands had cast the cleric's strongest heal, Holy Words. Lord Grimm's sudden increase in health made Huang Shaoshan's heart hurt. Fuck you bastard. WuxRWorldAudio.com. You're not afraid of overhealing? Huang Shaoshan started his trash talking again. I'm not afraid at all. Yi Shu replied. Lord Grimm's myriad manifestations umbrella shined with white light as well. He had healed himself. The amount healed was tiny, but nevertheless, he would always heal himself from time to time. Because we have more than enough mana, Yi Shu said. There was no need to hide it at this point. He believed that Blue Rain had certainly figured out their intentions by now, but what could they do? They had already accomplished their goal. Zhu Jingxi's Soul Speaker had consumed a substantial amount of mana. Even if they knew, they had no way of changing it. And soon, he would still need to consume more mana, because it was no Happy's turn to attack. Rush them. Lord Grimm, Boundless Sea, and Dancing Rain attacked together. And when Yi's little cold hands also went into the open, becoming their pillar. Suma Chung's Dancing Rain no longer let Blue Rain do as they pleased. Dancing Rain leaped into the air, and found her target, Zhu Jingxi's Soul Speaker. She knew that Soul Speaker was here, and had thought about how to quickly reach him. However, she hadn't attacked. Happy's intentions were truly too obvious. And this was only for Blue Rain. The viewers had figured it out far earlier than Blue Rain. Because when Blue Rain had guessed that Happy's cleric was on his way there and had seized that opportunity to attack. They had seen that, and when Yi's little cold hands had gone into position even earlier. But because of Yi Shu's orders, he had carefully stayed hidden and waited. The unskilled players might not understand why, but if Pan Lin and Li Yibo couldn't understand why given these circumstances, then they would simply be too clueless. Happy's plans were obvious, and they watched as Blue Rain fell for it. When Pan Lin and Li Yibo discussed it, they believed that Yu Wenzhou, Lu Hanwen, and Wei Chen's battle would be key. As it turned out, Wei Chen was miraculously able to hold on. He stalled two players simultaneously, even if it was such an embarrassing manner. Wei Chen is this match's MVP. Li Yibo said. I've never seen anyone that could make Yu Wenzhou look so helpless. But it looks like he's reached his limit. Pan Lin said. He gave his respects to the old general. Windward formation had fallen. Wei Chen had done his all, exhausting the entirety of his character's life. Happy's healer is almost there. Perhaps this will be a new turning point. Pan Lin said. There seems to be trap. Li Yibo saw Yu Wenzhou's and Lu Hanwen's movements, and suddenly sniffed something out. End chapter.